Hi, this is Julian Palmer, and welcome to the Discarded Image podcast. I'm assuming you watched the pilot of our short film series, Life Outside the Frame, the Star Wars episode. If you haven't, then I recommend you go off and do that, as we'll be talking about it throughout. And don't forget to check out our Patreon page for even more content. The link for that is in the description. I have an audio commentary I did on the film, which is sort of like me doing a video essay on my own film. And we also have a featurette promo with our lead actor, Stephen Chance. As I mentioned towards the end of this podcast, we're also doing a Q&A version, so if you are a Patreon supporter, you can submit a question in our Patreon feed. If we've already done the Q&A at the point you're listening to this, well, we have plenty of other content planned that you can submit questions for in the future, and you can at least access the Q&A, which I'm sure was a fruitful occasion. For the next hour, you'll hear a conversation that I had recently with my writing partner on the pilot. We've known each other for many years. I guess you could call us friends. He goes by the name of Alan Hawks, although his Twitter handle is @AlameHawks. Mine is @Julian J. Palmer. I hope you enjoy this discussion. I think one of the first questions people might have, or a good starting point, is, our relationship. How did we first meet? Do you have insight into that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. Well, we met at university. We were both doing film studies, which I refer to as film school when I tell people what I did at university, even though it wasn't really film school because we just, it was mainly theory, wasn't it? And we did very little practical work. I think in retrospect, I would have preferred to do a course that had more practical work, like the film and TV course. They seemed to come out of it with a lot more technical skills than we did.
Well, I would have gone to a film school.
Right.
I had that same regret in essence. When I was, 18 years old, I knew I wanted to be involved in film, but I didn't really have a structured plan of how to do it.
But the film studies course at the university we went to was pretty good. We had David Lustard there, who is semi-famous in the world of film studies, if that's possible. He was very good, very interesting. Seemed to like me a bit more than I was comfortable with. I found that he was had high expectations for me, and I was always going to disappoint him, and I have, obviously. So we met on the film studies course, and it was sort of a bit of a DOS course for university. It was a lot of the people there just did it because they had no idea what they wanted to study, but needed to get a degree. So they thought, well, I like Adam Sandler films and The Goonies, and I've watched all of them 30 times, so I could just do that more.
But yeah, I think although our degree didn't really help us in a practical sense as much, I think I made one film there. Because there was a general sense there that everyone wanted to do the same part. Everyone wanted to be in the director's chair, have the megaphone, and people were less interested in taking smaller roles and helping out, which I kind of understood because I wanted to obviously be a director as well. But I felt that I did at least play my role when I was doing another task. And just the equipment was lacking. You know, if you go to an actual film school, then you have students there who are studying all different types of skills. So you can get the person that's studying cinematography, the person that's studying sound, whereas with everyone kind of just wanting to direct or whatever, the actual technical elements suffered.
Yeah, well, Bret Easton Ellis now says that the young people he meets, none of them want to direct, because being a director isn't a thing anymore now that the film industry has almost completely collapsed. He says that the people he talks to don't want to direct, they just want to create content, which is...
Yeah, I'm not sure he said they don't want to direct, but they don't want to direct features. They don't want to... There's less and less people that want to follow that field because it's becoming starker reality. We have the
Sure.
we have the movements that we are inspired by, of course, like, the 70s, late 60s, 70s, New Hollywood era. Then you have, the independent film movement, in the 90s with Soderbergh and Tarantino and Jim Jarmusch, those kind of directors. But I guess it's fallen off to an extent. I mean,
Yeah, well, I guess it's like how Brexiteers say when you say that the economy is going to collapse, that makes it happen. And I don't think that's how economics works personally, but maybe they're right, because you have all of these people saying that the film industry has collapsed and saying that there are no good films being made and it's just Marvel and so on, and maybe that makes it happen. I don't know. I'm still pretty optimistic about the film industry. I think it's an enduring medium, and there have been lulls, and it took movements, and it took a couple of creative people to resurrect it in the 70s, because the film industry almost collapsed when the studio system fell apart, and then came back, and then we had Jaws, etc.
Didn't think we just had Jaws. I think Jaws is actually the point where things took a turn in many people's minds.
Yeah, the start of the blockbuster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think to maybe move on to topics that we should be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is the reason for doing this film? Like, what was the intention of creating or looking into the day-to-day activity of a stormtrooper, apart from commercial reasons?
So that was your motivation for coming up with the series. What was the inspiration? How did you come up with the idea?
I don't know. I mean, I remember I was having a meeting with my producer at the British Film Institute, in the coffee bar there. We have a lot of business meetings. You can't see me doing what is this?
Air quotes?
You can't see me doing the air quotes. I don't know what am I air quoting.
Business meetings, you're putting in air quotes because you just go there and murder prostitutes.
Correct. So, yeah, my producer went to get a coffee, and I was sat there, and it was around the time that I was doing the fifth episode in my original Discarded Image series.
Which one was that?
It was on Star Wars.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was a good one. Was the ending one of the first things you came up with?
I think, no, I thought about Nazis and how they must have felt coming back into their society after everyone knows that they're a part of a heinous, what's the word?
Anus?
Part of a heinous, evil Axis empire. But then I read one of the books I was using as research when I was kind of developing the actual script was a book called Eichmann in Jerusalem, which is a journalistic piece about a Nazi that was kind of somewhat in hiding, and in the 60s, the Israeli establishment caught him and put him on trial. But it was essentially, well, one of the things I picked up from reading that was that the Germans, to some extent, didn't have that ill feeling towards Nazis reintegrating. That there are a lot of them still in positions of power, in government roles, that they hadn't quite completely purged that.
Right.
I mean, I'm not sure if that's because, to an extent, anyone who was in Nazi Germany at the time is going to have some association towards it, and it's going to have some kind of participation in what happened, that you might just think we all, to some extent, are a part of this. Let's try and let bygones be bygones, I guess. So that reality is a lot different from this one. I think I think it was more dramatic and more comical if you had a Nazi-esque fascist character, but placed him in hipster London.
Yeah, it's funny. You didn't think hipsters would be the opposition to modern fascism, but I guess there's a lot of surprising things about the past couple of years.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's...
They're not a very effective opposition, though, are they? The sort of
Right.
slackers. Yeah, so how did you feel? Why did you want to humanize a fascist?
I told you, commercial reasons. No, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I had this kind of concern once I started doing it that similar to when Oliver Stone did W, or he's even been accused this with Nixon, that in trying to realistically portray or get into the head of or just show the life story of someone he doesn't agree with or
Right.
in many senses may despise or look down on or...
But as much as he humanized George Bush, he did also ridicule him. And
Yeah, but I think people on the left or his critics didn't think he was harsh enough, didn't think he ridiculed him quite enough, thought that he was too sympathetic.
during the writing process where we would pass drafts of the script back and forth, one thing I kept doing was taking out his fascist tendencies and just making it more of a comedy with Star Wars references, like the kind of I was trying to make it quite broad and silly, and you kept reining it in and trying to make it have a bit more depth. So ideas I would have would be things like when the police come into his flat and discover him in his stormtrooper outfit, you could have the camera pan down and reveal that he's naked from the waist down. That was the kind of tone I was going for, but you had different ideas.
I don't remember that note. Maybe
No?
that should have been in the film.
Oh, I really liked that idea. Anyway, so yeah, I was trying to make it. I was trying to make it broadly funny, and you were trying to make it more subtly funny, and we ended up with it this way.
Yeah, kind of.
But
meeting
I
them.
kept trying to take out his fascist tendencies and make him more of a sympathetic character because I had trouble relating to the kind of shitbag who he was originally. He was a lot more horrible in the earlier drafts of the script.
Really?
Yeah, in early drafts of the script, you grabbed her by the arm and said, "You're coming home with me, slut," or something like that. And yeah, I kept like deleting those lines and putting in more sort of moany, whiny, less horrifying lines.
I think in hindsight, I'd like to put back the "You're coming home with me" slut line. I think maybe he is too sympathetic. But yeah, that is one of the conundrums with this project, is what is that line? And also, I think I felt more that he was more reprehensible on the page, but once we cast the actor and he started inhabiting Jarvis, it changes. And that's not me saying it was a bad casting choice. I think Stephen was a great casting choice, but the actor will naturally just start to humanize the character more, and you find him more empathetic.
As long as the actor is a human rather than
A psychopath.
or something that's not a human.
So I mean, the first big scene really is the interview scene.
Well, we talked about how we thought it would be fun to have a stormtrooper in a sort of Shoreditch-like hipster environment, sort of postmodern open plan office with table tennis tables and bean bags all over the place. Yeah, maybe we should explain for the American audiences that twat is a much less offensive word in England than it is in America.
Right.
Twat's a friendly thing to say in England. You call your friends twats.
I don't call my friends twats unless they're being twats.
Right.
It's still a derogatory term, but it's quite a tame one.
Yeah, it's not a recognised swear word in England, really. You can say it on the radio, I think.
That wasn't a planned joke as well.
The cup was just there.
The cup was just there.
He just happened to drink from that cup.
Well, it was planned once we were there. I was choosing between, there was like one with a mustache on. I think there was a Mr. Men, like Mr. Grumpy one. That was more colourful.
Mm.
I didn't like that mug was white. That it didn't add any kind of vibrance to the shot, but
Sure.
compensated for that with, you know, the big red lips, telephone, the little rubber ducky in the background. Yeah, I mean, all those props were just props that we found laying around this
Right.
space, because we didn't build a set. We just found a location that kind of ticked the boxes we were trying to look for. It's based in Hackney, which you can't really
Whereabouts?
get by the canal.
Okay.
Interesting little fact of the day. Very luckily, we managed to shoot all the dialogue scene before the area was suddenly overrun by West Ham fans, like just shouting and swearing and shitting probably.
What, in the office?
No, but just
mean,
in the area. But even though we're on,
But I mean the dialogue in the office?
correct,
Right.
just as we finished the dialogue scene, we still had to do the sequence where he sees the Sand Person or Tusken Raider. But there's not many lines of dialogue there. Luckily, it's one of those occasions where you just get lucky. I feel that happens a lot, like low budget independent filmmaking is really flying by the seat of your pants, type of operation. But usually just about you get everything without any major F-ups.
So I didn't realise during the whole writing period and pre-production, I didn't realise that Sand Person is actually a slur. I thought that was just what they were called, Sand People and Sand Person. And they're actually Tusken Raiders, aren't they?
Yeah.
Although I guess they wouldn't call themselves Tusken Raiders.
But is a Sand Person a slur in just the Star Wars universe, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Is it?
I don't know.
Well,
I think
Sand People, they wouldn't call themselves Sand People or Tusken Raiders, would they? They'd
I
call
think one of
themselves-
the jokes that we were
They'd have some odd way of describing themselves.
I think one of the jokes, or not, or some of the
What sound did you use for the Tusken Raider cry in the end? Did you?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's one thing I'm still waiting on.
Ah, I see.
But
Well,
I've done a very good job right now of not using any Star Wars
Sound effects.
sound effects or music. Hopefully our music is just about not Star Wars to not get sued.
Legally distinct. But
I think so. I've seen stuff on
Yeah, sure.
royalty-free websites that are a lot closer than what we're doing. I felt that we were inspired by the stellar work of John Williams, but we also tried to add some other elements to it. So in the interview scene, I guess the thing that I wondered was whose side the audience is going to be on at that point, or
Sure.
whether it's kind of like an objective observation of two people that...
Right. Well, it was
their-
important to not make Jarvis comically stupid and to make it so that he just didn't get the hipster culture, sort of creative industry, whatever,
Right.
sort of
Yeah, I
open
mean-
plan office.
I still feel that scene is the one where we do poke fun at him for being somewhat, not stupid, but for saying...
Yeah, I don't think he's
absurd
stupid.
things.
But if you look at Photoshop skills of fascists, they're really bad at it. They just no good at graphic design. They're not creative people. They're, it's not that they're dumb. They are dumb, but it's not because of that. It's just they don't have creativity. They're notoriously uncreative.
And that's why they despise the arts.
Yeah, that's right. And they don't have a sense of humour, etc. I mean, we could list the characteristics of fascists.
So maybe in that scene, I think you were trying more to make what Jarvis was saying ludicrous, but I was probably more intent on making the interviewer more comical. So perhaps perhaps I'm just...
I think it was kind of the interviewers using sort of management speak. Well, he's using sort of hipster talk and talking about how the people who work there have to have the right attitude rather than the right experience, where Jarvis is using sort of interviewee techniques where he's trying to, things like if you're asked to list some of your weaknesses, you try to turn that into a humble brag and say things like, well, I can't say no, so I end up taking on too much work. That's what you're supposed to say in an interview, and I feel like at this point people see through that and people know that you're just saying what you think they want to hear.
Or I've got no social life, so I just work all the time.
Yeah.
I felt in that scene that some of the more kind of ludicrous elements that start happening, where he starts clearly referring to or mistakenly bringing up his fascist past or his stormtrooper past, I kind of saw that as reflexes, because I think that Jarvis is the kind of character that would, and this is implied in the opening, is methodical about his preparation, wants to look the part, and feel like he's done the necessary background research to fill this position. But the minute he starts getting hit with questions he wasn't expecting, he doesn't have anything like that prepared. So it sends him...
Snaps back.
So it sends him in a bit of a frenzy, and he just keeps accidentally referring to his... or the regime of his stormtrooper past.
The way he played it reminded me of Dr. Strangelove in a way, like the way he seems to raise his fist up and say, inspire great results, sort of reminded me of the way Dr. Strangelove can't control one of his arms.
Yeah, I think we did have that conversation. Like I did, or in an email I said that that Dr. Strangelove was definitely a strong influence on that character and particularly that scene.
Is that something you told the actor to do when filming? You did?
I didn't tell it to him on the day.
Okay.
But it was something we discussed either in person or via email. The way I like to approach directing, I think it's likely because my father's a basketball coach. I like to do a lot of kind of prep and all the kind of background stuff beforehand. So then
Run drills.
Yeah,
Up and down the court. Do laps.
With independent short films or like, the biggest element that you're always battling against is time. Like, you never have as much time as you'd like. That's good in some respects because it creates a tension. You have to make decisions on the fly. You have to cut the fat basically and just focus on what's important. But because of that, I very much see the filmmaking day as kind of match day, game day. And you got to have the right kind of prep beforehand, discuss with actors at least, make sure all these kind of little character ticks or, the kind of background research they're going to do or all those character elements are discussed and defined beforehand. But at the same time, I do like the actor to, I don't know exactly what I want, but I kind of know the modulation. Like, I know that I want, maybe try it this way, maybe try it that way. I have those kind of broad ideas in mind. I'd tell Stephen beforehand that, you know, in this scene, it's a bit of this and a bit of this. And when you're actually kind of directing the scene, you could ask them to just try one approach and then ask them to do a separate approach. And then you can combine that in a more nuanced fashion. Although I usually tend to use later takes because I don't know why, just they always seem to be better.
Sure. Well, you're refining it as you go along.
There's always that argument between what's better, something that's more immediate in the moment or something that is refined.
You haven't seen any Joe Swanberg films yet?
I saw
An episode of Easy.
I saw the Mark Maron one.
Right. But because there's no scripted dialogue, the first take is kind of like writing the dialogue, and then after that you can mess around with it.
Well, Kubrick he did, granted, do a lot of takes.
120
You can't deny that, but he also used to record rehearsals, so that might have accounted for 2 or 3 takes, maybe.
So he did 123 takes.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, kind of David Finch is the practitioner of that kind of approach, but he manages to be more efficient with it because of modern technology. He does a lot of kind of multicam, which I don't think Kubrick would have used so much. But I wish I could use more multicam because
sure.
One of the frustrations I find is discussing what I did a minute ago. You like to try different options and try and find the right groove for the actor. But once you get there, you're like, oh, okay, well, we got that, but now we've got to do the exact same process with the medium, do the same process with the wide. Or
right.
No, it's usually, you kind of go gradually more in, so it's, you know, if you're just doing kind of general coverage, it's wide, medium, close up. But I think that is useful for actors in a sense because it means they can modulate their performance and rein it in, probably make it more subtle as the camera gets closer.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is frustrating trying to match cuts and go through the same process. I would, in an ideal world, just have, and maybe this is like kind of a future thing, is you just can record a space.
Right.
And then just
like an ultra 20K resolution. And then
and then you can,
maybe
cinematographers would not, probably not enjoy that. But then again, with cinematographers, a lot of the time is they try to find that initial look, that initial tone that they want for the lighting, and then it's a case of matching it. So maybe cinematographers will have that same want.
Do you have a 4K TV?
I've got a 4K TV, but the TV is not really big enough to justify having 4K.
Do you think it's going to be 10K next, or would it be 20?
Got no idea.
Are they not talking about that yet? I thought it was 16, actually. I think I heard they're working on 16K.
The annoying thing is that as technology becomes more available and, in essence, potentially more manageable, as in you're not using these kind of bulky, like 35mm cameras or 70mm in some cases. But at the same time, people keep pushing the technology in a way that it does
becomes obsolete quicker.
No, it just becomes an issue still. Like the big thing with that I, am constantly annoyed with as the technology progresses is the file sizes, and just,
Right. You have to constantly get new computers to.
Yeah, and the one thing that definitely isn't catching up to file sizes is bandwidth or broadband. Like, you know.
Well, in regard to whatever comes after 4K, I think there are tiny microscopic creatures which live under the skin in your face, and at night they crawl out and lap up the oil on your skin and then crawl back in under your skin before you wake up. I think there is a level of detail that you don't need in film resolution. I think too much more than 4K, just everyone's going to be hideous, and you're going to need the most beautiful people in the world, and they're all going to have to be under 25, or else it's just going to be like, I mean, can you imagine Donald Trump's face in 4K? Can you imagine seeing that on a cinema screen? That would just be, it doesn't really bear thinking about. Oh God, he's disgusting. So gross.
So should we move on to the
Tinder date scene?
Yeah, sure.
Well, we met up the other day. I think it was Saturday. We're recording this on Wednesday, and was that you had a go on my Tinder? Was that your first experience of Tinder?
Well, when you say have a go, what?
Well,
it sounds like, I went into the bathroom of the pub and was just scrolling through with my hand down my pants.
No, that's not. Well, you didn't, so that's not what I was implying. But no, I think people say that they play Tinder. That bit where you're swiping left and right.
Playing the game.
That is playing Tinder. I think that's what people describe that as.
Right.
So that was your first go.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a relationship now for, I think, a few years, 3 or 4 years.
And your girlfriend had a go on it as well. And you were both just swiping left constantly. It was really upsetting for me because I have much lower standards than you.
Right.
It's like 80% right, and someone has to be really weird for me to not swipe right.
Every script you write seems to have some kind of reference to Tinder.
Does it?
You're bearing your soul.
What was the other one?
If you're a listener and you find, if they find your voice sexy, or even your, Twitter profile, if they find you alluring, then put him at his misery. Just DM him.
Sure.
Ask him for a date.
I am kind of busy though, so I don't know. I can't guarantee a response.
And you might have to go to Northampton, which
no one wants to do, because why would you want to do that?
But you still have most of your dates seem to be in London. You keep coming back for that sole purpose, it seems.
No, I don't know. I get more matches in London because there are more people here. Because in London, I think on Tinder you're only allowed to like a certain amount of people a day, and then it says you've run out of people, or it says you can't like anyone else and you have to wait. Whereas in Northampton it says there is no one else living here, so you should move. So it's a different process. But no, I don't go on that many dates actually, because, like I said, I'm very, very busy and just don't have the time.
But again, going back to the film, I mean, it was
good idea.
Another attempt for us to, have this seemingly old-fashioned or not part of the hip current vogue.
Sure.
Tinder's got this reputation for being a bit soulless, you shouldn't...
Yeah, it definitely is.
You shouldn't be looking for long-term commitments or romance on Tinder. So why not try Bumble?
Right.
Is Bumble the one where... I think it's the app where it's based upon people that you kind of run into on a day-to-day basis. Like they're on the same bus as you, on the same train as you. It's kind of the stalker dating app.
That sounds ideal for me. I'm going to look that up.
Right.
How would we Google that? Stalker dating app? I don't know.
Bumble.
No, it's not Bumble, because Bumble's Just the only difference between Bumble and Tinder is
Happen.
women...
Might be
Does it
Happen.
happen? Okay. I will definitely get that.
Right.
I mean, dating and stalking, those are my two interests, really.
But I guess the idea was that even though the character of Kathy, the Tinder datee, she's, not a kind of 20-something Tinderite, but she's more of a...
You're coming up with some good terms.
Right. She's more a fast-talking career gal, as the Coen brothers referred to in Jennifer Lee's character in Hudsucker Proxy, which in itself is a kind of riff on Rosaline Russell's character in
His Girl Friday.
His Girl Friday. But yeah, the idea was to set Jarvis against this
modern woman.
This kind of modern career woman who is using Tinder quite strategically, quite ruthlessly, is probably looking for love in some respects, and I imagine that's why she'd swipe on someone like Jarvis. She's attempting to use the app of Tinder to have some kind of meaningful exchange, but quite quickly she realizes that this isn't.
But she still, wants to have fun with someone. She doesn't want to be stuck with this morose dinosaur. Should we talk about some of the scenes that we had to cut out, or
no? I don't know what those are.
There was the dream sequence,
right?
Yeah, want to talk about that?
I remember I was watching Full Metal Jacket again not too long ago, actually in the same kind of time we were developing the script, and I was reading about the concept of the shadow and Jung's concept of the shadow, and that in some respects was kind of interlinking with this idea of the Tusken Raider, and how that is to some extent Jarvis's shadow. That was a kind of a thought at the time. Whether I stay true to that, who knows? But it's in Full Metal Jacket, you notice that the enemy until the final scene are never seen, and the shadow is a lot about you project what you, or your shadow essentially. So your negative traits you project onto others. I think Kubrick was trying to say that America, the West, are always trying to find some external enemy to project their shadow upon.
Sure.
And so, yeah, there was a dream sequence that was essentially some nightmare he was having about a sand person.
Was it going to be in a desert?
No.
Oh, I thought wasn't that in the script? He's like in the middle of a desert and a sand person comes up to him and stabs him.
It wasn't in a desert.
Oh, where was it?
Sounds like that scene in Sexy Beast.
Right, because you showed me that scene from Sexy Beast.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I thought that.
Yeah, I was going to rip off that scene in Sexy Beast, which I also think is somewhat related to the shadow. In a sense, like, to make it even more plain, like Darth Vader is kind of like a shadow figure. A classic kind of shadow figure.
Yeah, in terms of colorization at least. So where was it?
So I think,
if not in a desert, where was he in the dream sequence?
in his bedroom.
In his bedroom.
Yeah.
So he's lying in bed, and a sand person comes, a Tusken Raider rather, comes in and stabs him.
No, he goes to behead him, like ISIS might. And you actually notice in the film, when Jarvis wakes up, he's kind of stroking his neck.
And he's got a bloody nose.
Well, that's not from the dream, though, is it?
No, but... I mean,
no, but when he wakes up, yeah, like he's feeling his throat, because my idea was that subtly, I obviously didn't want to show that his neck was getting sliced because it's YouTube, and I didn't want to be too gross or just not have it or taken down because it's essentially a ISIS snuff film. But I wanted to subtly imply that he had a dream where his throat got slit. But we filmed that before I had to cut the dream sequence due to time. But on the day...
Doesn't he wake up after getting in the fight in the bar?
Yeah, and he also is, hungover. And when you're hungover, you're very...
achy.
Well, and...
You have a bad back?
What's the word I'm looking for? Dehydrated.
Sure.
So I'm sure if you've had a drink in your time, you've woken up with that soreness in the throat.
But I don't think anyone watched it and thought, why the fuck is he rubbing his throat? What the fuck is this? This doesn't make sense. I'm sure it's fine for everyone.
I'm not watching this or anything else these people make ever
I'm
again.
going to downvote.
This is getting 1 star on IMDb.
Yeah.
We should put the film on IMDb.
Sure. And make a lot of puppet accounts for giving it 10 stars.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love the bit where he rubs his throat. So I rub my throat sometimes.
There's got to be some kind of backstory there.
I'm going to pay for extra podcasts so that I can find out why he's rubbing his throat. Yeah, we're going to do that. So keep checking IMDb for that.
So I guess the next thing to talk about is the shift in...
The relapse.
Well, the relapse, for one, which is also the shift where I guess Jarvis becomes a bit more clearly unlikable.
Yeah. He stops trying to integrate.
Yeah. But I think to an extent that's why you may not, I don't know, but how you can sympathise with him. Because even though he has these fascist tendencies, he's still trying to, be a halfway... He's still trying to be a part of this society, trying to integrate. But, like a alcoholic or like a drug addict, he just... And after a number of setbacks, he just, relapses, essentially.
Oh, we also had to cut a bit where we were going to do a sort of, like the scene in The Graduate where he's wearing the diving costume.
Right.
We were going to have the scene where he's walking down the high street from Jarvis's perspective and have it be from inside the helmet where you feel sort of isolated and...
Well, and everyone's shouting abuse at him. But again, the common factor why that scene wasn't made was time. Actually, I went on the street and I was trying to rally extras to do that sequence, but even the people that were like really interested in what's going on, even the kind of young Brixtonite kids were, I said, do you want to, hurl abuse at this stormtrooper? And they were like, how much for? I was like, well, I haven't got any money. So, yeah. I guess there are those films where you experiment with how far you can push someone's unlikability before the audience no longer goes on that journey. But I think other people have done that experiment, and what usually comes out of it is the audience still likes that character. Recent examples, like Jordan Belfort, DiCaprio's character in The Wolf of Wall Street, or even Walter White in Breaking Bad.
Did you feel you liked John Belfort? Was that his name?
Maybe that's a bad example because he's not... I don't know whether it's likable, but...
Sure. Yeah, well, it's a complicated thing because it's quite a long film and you do sort of hate him, and you don't really feel bad for him when he gets punished, but it's sort of a comedy, and like the scene where he has the delayed fused, or the lewds with the delayed fuse, is just so funny, and that film was funny through most of it. So I don't know if
So perhaps it was an
likability.
influence. So jokes mask the hideous nature of men,
Yeah, well, I guess
the hideous nature of man.
for me, it's you're interested in other things in the film other than liking the main character. You're going along for a different kind of ride than having a protagonist who you really want to succeed and you want him to be okay, like in some sort of romantic comedy where you want the two leads to get together and you're really hoping it all works out. It's not that kind of relationship.
I guess going back to us shoehorning politics into what should be a light YouTube entertainment.
But Star Wars is inherently political.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about with the Tusken Raiders, or Sand People, is the slur of the universe. The reason why that was an obvious joke was because they do seem inherently. That seems like a racist stereotype. Like, I don't want to offend Star Wars fans, and it's not as though we're rallying against that.
Right.
That
They're not the most racist aliens in Star Wars, though.
True.
There are many more. You've got the Viceroys in Episode 1. And
well, the Viceroy scenes are on the cutting room floor, as you know.
are they? No,
Well,
they're still in it.
No, in our film.
Oh, Viceroy scene.
There were scenes where he was going around seeing Viceroys, but we then thought we'd keep the references to the original trilogy and not kind of go into...
I don't remember that. What was he? Viceroys? Are you serious? You're messing with me. No, I don't remember that at all.
Right. I thought that was your addition.
What, in the script?
Wasn't that the actual dream sequence that he was having a debate in a...
In the Senate.
He was having a debate in the Senate, but then he realised that he wasn't wearing any trousers.
Right. Yeah.
That's the sequel.
Sure. Yeah, so watch this video, we'll rack up some views, share it on social media, and maybe we'll do a sequel with the exciting debates in the Senate.
So, a lot of people think going to the cinema by yourself is a social faux pas.
I used to think that.
Yeah, and
until
you felt
I
that way. Like, I'm glad that recently you've... Because I remember that you're one of the people that I'd ask, have you seen this film? It's like, oh no, I haven't found anyone to go with. And I was like, well, just go by yourself.
Yeah.
And you finally got to a point in your life where you've gotten over that hump.
Yeah.
You're actually...
Because so few of my friends have any interest in film that for years I would just hardly ever go to the cinema unless it was something massive and some sort of big budget thing that a lot of people wanted to see, and we'd go in a group. But going to the cinema by yourself, it's good.
So, I went to the cinema by myself. The very first time was Return of the Jedi, the
Re-release.
the re-release. My dad took me to see A New Hope, and I think Empire Strikes Back. I think he took us to both of those. But then when Jedi came out, I had no one to see it with. No one wanted to see it with me, so that was the very first time I just said, I really want to see this film. I've got to see how this trilogy concludes. So I got on my little 12-year-old bike and cycled up to the Showcase Cinema in Reading, or it's actually in Winners Triangle, and
Had your bike stolen?
no, fully luxuriated in the Star Wars experience.
So that you first saw those films in the cinema, the
True.
re-releases?
Correct.
Wow.
And then I remember, because it was very difficult to get a hold of the films, I think. you 15-year-old YouTube folk don't realise a time where, something as huge as Star Wars wasn't easy to get a hold of.
Yeah.
You certainly couldn't get a hold of the original editions. I mean, it's still difficult to now, to be honest. But I remember having to try and get I wanted to get a widescreen special edition box set, and
On VHS.
yeah, on VHS, and Blockbuster didn't have it. Who's Blockbuster, you say? Blockbuster didn't have it. All sorts of. Actually, I think I did get it off Blockbuster eventually, but it was like I had to look them up on what was then a very retro internet system, and managed to find somewhere that was able to ship this trilogy. It wasn't really, you couldn't go to HMV or Tower Records or any of these facilities where all these institutions where you could walk in and purchase a VHS that you could then play on your widescreen. I think I was one of the first to get the kind of widescreen. What were those old TVs? What was the
HRT.
Is that what they're called? Wasn't it
yeah.
CRT?
CRT?
I think so.
HRT is some eye scans.
But yeah, I mean, when you used to kind of rent videos,
Yeah.
they'd always be in pan and scan. That was always an absolute nightmare for people that actually cared about the correct aspect of
Sure.
movies. But they were stocking in some shops widescreen versions of the film. So I remember I had The Great Escape.
I remember
had Apocalypse Now.
Right.
And I tried very hard to get the Star Wars trilogy in a silver box set, and it meant a lot to me at that point in my life.
Yeah, I remember the widescreen ones were silver and the full screen ones were gold of the VHSs.
So by the time The Phantom Menace came out, I think I was... I remember I was quite excited about it. I think I was still a fan. I remember, actually, that it was 1999.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to myself, okay, 1999, it's only like January, but I know that the three best films that are going to come out this year are going to be Eyes Wide Shut, The Thin Red Line, and The Phantom Menace. And granted, Phantom Menace, I got that one wrong, but 2 out of 3,
Sure.
pretty good batting average, I think. So you may be listening to this and thinking, oh, these fellas have highfalutin either opinions of themselves, or I'm sure when we were young guys in our late teens, early 20s, thinking about film, cinema, looking up to the 70s Hollywood directors, looking up to the French New Wave directors, and, looking up to anyone who's made a dent in this format, we weren't thinking Star Wars pastiche on YouTube.
No, that's true.
But that is where we are today. That's why we're here. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing the comments once this airs, because obviously we do deal with potentially controversial material. I think I was the one that was pushing the whole Tusken Raider idea, and I know that I was getting a bit of pushback at the time. But I just felt if we're going to look at a fascistic character, if he doesn't have some kind of quite negative and, racist attributes, then
Yeah.
it's going to be sugarcoating it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we didn't end up with the draft of the script I sent back first time, because although it had some good jokes in it, really wasn't much substance there.
Right. Is that something that is common in your work?
No, just
Lack of essence, lack of substance, lack of essence. But I think I'm always worried about, like, what's the what's the meaning, what's the substance, and I'm always trying to make sure I satisfy those urges. And sometimes I forget about, simple things like
Having
this
him
bit
naked
here.
from the waist down.
Yeah, like having the stormtrooper naked from the waist down. I probably should have let that one happen. I'm sorry. I'm repenting for that decision.
Wasn't there a shot where you accidentally see him wearing pajama bottoms?
No,
No?
there was one shot.
Or tracksuit bottoms or something?
Yeah, so when we were doing the bit where he comes out the flat and he sees the Jawa, we did have a shot where he chucks the bin bag on the floor. But looking back at the rushes, you pan down and you see he's clearly just not wearing Stormtrooper. He's just like wearing black pajamas. And I think because it was quite a long day, like somehow, me, the AD, the cinematographer, the camera assistant, makeup, everyone seemed to miss the fact that he just wasn't wearing bottoms. I don't know how that happened. It was just a glaring error but I, in the end didn't need that shot, so it's not a disaster. So I think we're going to wrap up now, because Lord knows we need to.
Yeah.
We're assuming the people watching this are enjoying the time you spent with us. You like our content, you like our perspectives on this, that, and the other. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're just masochists. Maybe you're just masochistic and just want something that's going to irritate you or whatever. But we're doing this podcast before the actual content is up. We're hoping it's going to be up in a few days. For those of you who want to hear more, if you come to our Patreon page and become a supporter, you can come into the comments section and ask questions. We plan to do a Q&A version of this podcast where we respond to questions that are sent our way. We will also have some more personal anecdotes that we'd like to get into. I know you have a Tinder experience with a fascist that you'd love to let the world know.
She definitely voted UKIP. If you want to harass me on Twitter, I'm a lame hawks. Send me some obnoxious shit. I'd really like that.
At a lame hawks. He just wants any kind of acknowledgement, really. Like, tell him you love him, tell him you hate his guts. Either one, you're at least acknowledging his existence.
That's right. I do exist.